They never built a school, never built a city. And that offering they took last Sunday, you already know where that went.
Get your hands off my car. You gave tithes and offering? No, back the f***, man.
Akon got landowners in Senegal to give up their property for a $6 billion African city and then walked away when it collapsed. No refund, no apology, just a pivot to more realistic projects and 2 arrests in 6 months on the side. But what really gets me is this. The pitch Akon used is word for word the same pitch Dr. Umar Johnson has been running for 20 years. And word for word the same pitch your pastor gives every single Sunday. Same structure, same language, same exit strategy when it falls apart, same BS. And none of them ever blamed themselves when it did. What they are all selling is not a school, a city, or a vision fund. They are selling the feeling of being someone who showed up for their people. And once you see how that transaction works, you are going to recognize it everywhere. Akon City was announced in 2018 like it was the most important thing that happened to Africa in a generation. $6 billion. A whole cryptocurrency called Akon, a designated plot of land in Senegal, 200 acres, handed over by the government because they believed in it. And Akon was out here doing interviews, doing TED Talks, standing in front of renderings of this gleaming futuristic skyline talking about, this is for us. Real life Wakanda, bruh. That was the actual phrase people were using.
Akon City is gonna be the first futuristic smart city in Africa.
And are you working on that now?
Oh yeah, we're in process working on it as we speak.
Local landowners gave up their property. Regular people bought Akon at 15 cents because they wanted to be part of something. And then, July 2025, the project is officially abandoned. Akon says he is pivoting to more realistic projects. The land got returned to the Senegalese government. The people who gave up their property never got compensated. The crypto is now worth fractions of a cent. And the only physical thing that ever existed on that site was a welcome center and a sign with the city's name on it. Then April 2026, he gets arrested in Georgia on an outstanding bench warrant. Second arrest in 6 months. Living his life while the people who believed in him are sitting on worthless coins and empty land. That looks like failure, but failure means you tried. That right there is an exit. Clean, quiet, and already done by the time anyone realized it. And the reason nobody caught it in time is because they were too busy defending the vision to notice the man was already gone. Now here is where I need you to slow down with me for a second, because the easy story here is Akon scammed people. And yeah, the receipts support that read, but that is not the most important thing happening in this story. What I want you to look at is the specific language he used. This is for us. Africa needs this.
We? Who's we?
We have been waiting for someone to do this for our people. Every single element of that pitch is pointed at one thing: your identity. Not your wallet, your identity. Because once your identity is attached to the investment, you are not just buying a token anymore. You are declaring who you are. You are saying, I am the kind of person who shows up for Africa, who puts their money where their mouth is, who does not just talk about Black excellence, but funds it. And that is a completely different transaction than buying a product. You can walk away from a bad product. You cannot walk away from your own identity that easily. So when Akon's pitch landed, it was not because people were naive enough to think a $6 billion city was going to appear in 2 years. It was because the feeling of being someone who invested in it felt real. The city was always secondary. That feeling was always the product. And Akon did not stumble into that. He learned it, which is what makes the next part so important.
Now listen to me very carefully.
Dr. Umar Johnson has been raising money for the Frederick Douglass Marcus Garvey Academy since 2005, and the pitch has never changed once. This is for Black boys.
Somebody asked me the other day, what is going to make your school so much different? Don't we already have a lot of schools? You got a lot of schools, but you don't have a lot of schools teaching our children what they need to be taught, how they need to be taught it. At the Frederick Douglass Marcus Garvey Academy, Black consciousness will be a course. If you don't pass it, you don't graduate. At the Frederick Douglass Marcus Garvey Academy, white supremacy will be a course. If you don't pass it, you don't graduate.
Our children are being deliberately destroyed. If you are not supporting this, you are part of the problem. Same collective framing, same urgency dial turned all the way up. Same implication that skepticism is not caution, it is betrayal.
You don't find that suspicious? You don't find that suspicious?
You are not just questioning a man, you are questioning whether black boys deserve a future. Over $1.7 million raised across 2 decades. And what did that produce? A building in Wilmington, Delaware that nearly got auctioned by the city. Over $76,000 in unpaid water bills. Not construction debt, not architect fees, water bills. The most basic operating cost imaginable, and it almost took the whole thing down while Umar was on Instagram asking people to hit the Cash App. And here's what really seals it for me. Umar ran this same play in Baltimore, in New York, in Oakland, in St. Louis. Walks around an old building on camera, tells the audience he is scouting a location for the FDMG in their city, asks for donations. Talks about opening a school in Ghana, Nigeria, Mars, Venus, you name it. Never signs a contract, never puts a bid down, just packs up and moves to the next city with a different zip code and the exact same script.
Business.
At some point, that stops being a pattern and starts being a business model. Every single one of these pitches has a built-in defense system for when it falls apart, and the defense is always the same move. Take the blame off the man and drop it directly onto the people who gave. Umar got pressed about the money and the missing progress, and you know what he said? Black people spend $19 million a year on Quaker grits. That was his answer. Quaker grits. As if the school would be open right now if black people just switched to store brand oatmeal. Akon's version? He went on the Kid L podcast in March 2026 and said, "It started to become a target. When I first announced it, everybody was excited. But then as it started to gain traction, that's when the sabotage started." Sabotage, the city that the Senegalese government's own tourism director called no longer relevant. The site that a local resident described to the BBC as, "We were promised jobs and development. Instead, nothing has changed." That is not sabotage. That is a man who needed the word sabotage to exist, so he did not have to use the word failure. Because that sentence, "I failed you," kills the next pitch. But they stopped us keeps the visionary intact. If the people failed the visionary is still a visionary. The mechanism only survives if the man at the top stays clean. So the blame has to travel downward every single time. That is not emotion, that is strategy. Here's the thing about Akon and Umar that people keep missing. They did not invent this. They learned it. Because this exact structure, the collective ask, the identity pressure, the blame redirect, the pitch that survives every collapse, it has been running inside black churches since before either of them was born. Prosperity gospel. The idea that giving to God returns to you multiplied, that the pastor is God's vessel on earth, that if you question the offering, you are not being financially responsible, you are demonstrating a lack of faith. Creflo Dollar told his congregation he needed a $65 million private jet to spread the gospel, and he got it.
What? Bro, what are you talking about, man?
Kenneth Copeland is worth an estimated $300 million, pays 0 taxes, and once told an interviewer he refuses to fly commercial because he does not want to be in a tube full of demons. The man has his own airport.
You said that you don't like to fly commercial because you don't want to get into a tube with a bunch of demons. Do you really believe that human beings are demons?
No, I do not. And don't you ever say I did. We wrestle not with flesh and blood, but principalities and powers.
And then you have Lamore Miller-Whitehead, the bling bishop out of Brooklyn. Designer suits, Birkins, the whole performance.
Because I'm a Christian and I walk in the blood of Jesus. Give him some praise.
Sentenced to prison for fraud, using his congregation's faith to fund a lifestyle his donations could not actually support. And even after the sentence came down, there were still people in that congregation defending him, because calling it a scam means admitting the faith was misplaced. That silence, that protective silence, is the most valuable thing the pitch produces. More valuable than the donation itself, because it buys the next pitch time to breathe. That is why Akon is already working on the next project. That is why Umar is already in a new city. And that is why the plate is going around again this Sunday. The pitch does not need to work. It just needs you to stay quiet long enough for them to run it again.
So let's just lay it out clean. Because once you put all three of them on the same table, the architecture is identical every single time. Step 1, the ask is never personal. It is always collective. You are not giving money to a man. You are giving to black boys, to Africa, to God's kingdom on earth. The individual disappears behind the cause. And that is intentional, because you cannot hold a cause accountable the way you can hold a person accountable. Step 2, skepticism gets framed as betrayal. Question Umar, and you are against black boys getting an education. Question Akon, and you hate Africa. Question the offering plate, and you lack faith, and God will withhold your blessing. The mechanism turns your own critical thinking into a character flaw. So you swallow the doubt and you give. Step 3, when the money disappears and the promise does not materialize, the blame travels downward, always, never up. The visionary stays a visionary. The people who gave become the reason it did not work. In step 4, the pitch survives. Umar is still fundraising. Prosperity gospel is a billion-dollar industry. Akon was already talking about the next project before the dust settled on the abandoned city. 3 different men, 3 different costumes, 1 playbook. And the reason nobody named it before is because naming it means looking back at every time you gave and asking whether you were funding a vision or funding someone's exit. Something important to talk about is the reason this pitch works is not because black people are naive. Well, sometimes we are, but the main reason it works is because every single one of these pitches is built on a pain that is completely legitimate. Black boys are being failed by the American education system. That is documented. African economic dependency is a real structural problem with the real history behind it. The need for community, for spiritual grounding, for somewhere that feels like it belongs to you. That is not manufactured. These men did not invent the wound. They just figured out how to charge admission to the cure. And that is what makes it so hard to walk away from, even when the receipts are right in front of you. Because calling it a scam does not just mean calling out the man. It means sitting with the fact that the pain underneath it is real and the solution being offered is not. That gap between a real problem and a fake solution is exactly where the pitch lives. And it is a very profitable place to set up shop. The hunger to do something real for your people does not go away when the city gets abandoned. So the next person who shows up with the same pitch finds the door already open. That is not weakness. That is what happens when a real wound meets a practiced hand. And here is the trap that nobody talks about. By the time the collapse comes, by the time the city is gone, the school is still empty, the pastor is sentenced, the person who gave is stuck, because calling it a scam means admitting you got taken. And that is a sentence most people cannot say out loud. So they go quiet. They stop posting about it. They stop defending it publicly, but they also do not condemn it, because condemnation requires admission. And that silence, that specific protective silence, is the most valuable thing the pitch ever produces. Drewski figured this out. His January 2026 megachurch parody went viral overnight.
I'm gonna have Wanda stand up here. Wanda, please. Wanda told us earlier this month that she could not have a baby anymore. So I impregnated her with the word of God.
Not because it was shocking, because it was precise. He named the mechanics so accurately that people who had been sitting in those pews for 20 years started laughing instead of defending, and laughter breaks the silence. That is why that video hit different from every other church joke that came before it. It did not mock the faith, it named the transaction. Once you name the transaction, the silence loses its grip. That is the trap breaking, and it cannot be unbroken. Every generation gets its version of this pitch. The names change, the project changes, the currency changes, but the structure never does, because it doesn't need to. It works on something that does not expire. The hunger to build something real for your people. The desire to be someone who showed up when it mattered. That is not a flaw. That is one of the most human things there is, and the people running this playbook know it better than anyone. So the question is not whether the next pitch is coming. It is already here. It is always here. The question is whether you can feel the structure underneath it before you feel the feeling it is selling. Because the school does not exist. The city is overgrown. But the part of you that wanted those things to be real, that part was never the problem. The problem was who got paid for it. If you have been in one of these rooms, gave to the school, bought the coin, put money in that plate, did you ever get your answer on where it went? Drop it in the comments, because I think that conversation is long overdue. And speaking of that, you should watch my take on MJ biopic I dropped last week. It just popped on your screen. Click now, and I'll see you on the next one. Panda out.